And at 10, Firebrand. A superpowered enforcer for Justin Hammer, Firebrand is a former activist who turned to violence after believing peaceful protest produced no results, which sounds awfully familiar now thanks to the Flag Smasher's introduction, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. First appearing in Iron Man Volume 1 number 27 from 1970, Gary Gilbert was born in Detroit, Michigan. Gary wore a suit with an armored exoskeleton that gave him superhuman strength and resistance to fire. It also housed flamethrowers, which allowed him to shoot out, fire, and thermal blasts from his hands, one mounted on each wrists, and flying jets that gave him the ability to fly, which I'm pretty sure sounds familiar at this point. Except with the Flag Smashers having already been introduced, and no Iron Man remaining in the MCU as a counter, Firebrand making an appearance seems a little far-fetched. It's still entirely possible, perhaps this version gets inspired by the Flag Smashers, and maybe Peter or someone has to end up dealing with them, but it would be on a much smaller scale, since with all the movements, Marvel could be worried about upsetting people, and I don't think that they would handle I don't know how they would handle this one. And at 9, Spy Master. First introduced in Iron Man number 33 in 1971, the original Spy Master was leader of the Espionage Elite, and they were a formidable opponent for Iron Man, and successfully infiltrated Stark Industries on more than one occasion. Man, it's like Star Labs, you just walk in the front door. He's also evaded Iron Man's grasp multiple times. After his operative Mark Sharon was killed by the Ghost while using the Spy Master identity, the original Spy Master just let the world believe that he was dead. Others have attempted to assume the role as Spy Master, but none really did all that well. Years later, he returned to action after being found by Norman Osborn, but quickly returned to the shadows. He owned a supervillain club, and when the Avengers left Earth in order to battle the Builders, he gathered a group of supervillains and then broke in Stark Tower to steal Iron Man's technology, because the tower was basically defenseless. And while this could be plausible, seeing how Iron Man is dead so his compound would remain partially unguarded, I don't think that the MCU is going to go this route, even if the character has been around for 50 years. It was actually 50 years this January, which is kinda nuts.
Number 8, Mephisto. On that note, the Marvel Cinematic Universe does feel like it's preparing itself to embrace the darker elements of its comic book counterparts, with projects such as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and Moon Knight out and about, and Blade on the way with the Black Knight semi-introduced, not to mention the Dweller in Darkness and Shang-Chi. The MCU is getting a darker side, and what's darker than some demons? And if we're talking demons, why not start with one a few of us thought was going to be showing up in the Loki show? Mephisto is the perfect villain to anchor that Hell on Earth conflict that seems to be coming for Doctor Strange and the other characters who also happen to be a part of the Midnight Suns, a team of mystically powered occult fighters. It would be a unique villain for the Avengers, or maybe an MCU Midnight Suns team to face. Number 7, Chthon. Last on the list of possible demons would have to be the Elder God Chthon. As the Earth's first black magician, he would make an excellent Doctor Strange villain, or even a mystical based threat like Mephisto or Nightmare. More than that though, he was the creator of the Darkhold, that dark magical book that first showed up in WandaVision and then more recently in the Multiverse of Madness, where it corrupted the Scarlet Witch. Funnily enough, something similar happened in the comics too, only the Darkhold corrupted Wanda for the express purpose of releasing Chthon into the world. In the Darkhold story, it is Wanda who does eventually defeat Chthon with the quote-unquote help of Doctor Doom, and given her recent transgressions in WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, it might be a nice way for her to redeem her character. Maybe. Number 6, Kang the Conqueror. Jonathan Majors will portray the notable villain of Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania for the first time outside of the Loki series. But there's no way a villain of this threat level will stop there. Kang's advanced tech, large intellect, and ability to time travel means he can make intricate plans to attack enemies before they even know what hit them. One great story for the MCU to draw upon is Kang War, and many fans wondered why the Avengers did not simply go back in time and de-life Thanos as a baby in Avengers Endgame, as kind of a joke, but this story follows up on that idea, but with a villain that can combat it. Kang's retaliation by going around attacking baby versions of the Avengers and erasing them from existence is an even darker version of the blip. Sam Wilson, Jane Foster, Peter Parker, and the daughter of Hank Pym and Vision are all members of the current Avengers roster and all play a part in the story. In addition to new faces we know are coming, like the Black Knight. Not only do the heroes match up, but it also provides an epic and compelling story about Kang, properly demonstrating the power that Kang wields while showing his influence on history. Number 5, Doctor Doom. Once Marvel announced a Fantastic Four film was on the horizon, they pretty much confirmed that we would see Doctor Doom, one of the most famous supervillains in Marvel's lineup. It's incredibly unlikely that they'd leave him out of the new adaptation. Although Doctor Doom was introduced as a Fantastic Four foe, he has the resources and power, both magical and technological, to take on the current MCU Avengers. easily. We can also easily see Earth's mightiest heroes meeting the MCU's Doom within the next few years. There's even the possibility of Doom becoming the next big bad of the MCU. Kevin Feige has been dropping some not so subtle hints about the possibility of Secret Wars taking place within the MCU, and no matter which version they adapt, Doctor Doom is a crucial character in all those stories. Personally, I hope it's the 2015 version, as we have already heard mention of the incursions from Reed Richards, and with the Sacred Timeline going into complete upheaval, it's possible that could be in an incursion starting event. Just give me God Emperor Doom already! Number 4. Magneto. It's hard to imagine Marvel introducing the X-Men into the MCU without also introducing Charles Xavier's #1 frenemy, Magneto. Magneto is such a key and imposing villain in the comics. He has been portrayed twice on the screen, with Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen killing it both times. Furthermore than just the popularity of the character and the necessity for him to appear opposing the mutants, some insider gossip and possible rumors suggest that Magneto will be teaming up with none other than Doctor Doom in the 5th phase of Marvel. And not only does that completely make sense, it's also terribly cool to imagine. There isn't much to say, because if the MCU is getting mutants, this is kind of a no-brainer. Number 3. Galactus. In Eternals, we learn that unborn Celestials are planted inside planets across the universe, waiting for intelligent life to reach a point in which those Celestials can use that energy to be born, destroy said planet, and begin creating another sun that will power another galaxy in the place of the one destroyed. Being an ancient universe entity, Galactus is an all-powerful cosmic being that acts as a balance of power in the current universe. He does this by devouring planets throughout the cosmos as a source of energy to stay alive. It is more likely than not that Arishem the Judge, a Celestial, considers the death of a baby Celestial as a punishable offense. Galactus could be in the MCU as a tool the Celestials use to devour planets. Galactus often prides himself as a force of balance in the universe, and with Earth being such a powerhouse planet in the cosmos, its failed emergence is likely to upset the balance of things. Or, what if Galactus was actually hunting planets with the immense amount of energy a celestial seed would provide? This cosmic being is known for having a huge appetite that can only be satisfied by consuming the energy of planets. With certain planets, including Earth, hosting a celestial seed inside of them, a Herald of Galactus could view it as a great source of energy to keep Galactus fed. And that's not even mentioning the Fantastic Four. They're also famous for doing battle with Galactus. He also shares a connection with another famous Marvel character. There are lots of reasons he could show up. Number 2. Apocalypse. When we were talking about Kang, we talked about how he traveled through history. Well, speaking of characters who had roles in history, one of Kang's time-displaced alternates is called Rama-Tut, who was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, and he had a bit of a backstory that involved another major villain, the ancient proto-mutant Apocalypse. More than his connection to Kang and the mutants, Apocalypse is also empowered with ancient celestial technology, and the Celestials have had more than a few mentions throughout the MCU, with a major role in the Eternals movie. Also, this major villain is arguably as powerful, if not possibly more powerful, than Thanos in different ways. Actually, speaking of Thanos, Apocalypse may be a bit too much like the Big Chin in terms of stature and the fact that he has his Horsemen of the Apocalypse like Thanos has the Black Order, but he has so much more to offer than that. I also think we gotta get a live-action redemption for this villain after the kind of bad Age of Apocalypse X-Men movie from 2016, but that's just my opinion. Number 1. The Beyonder. The original Secret Wars series, initiated by Marvel Comics in the 80s, was spearheaded by a cosmic entity known as the Beyonder, who observed the multiversal heroes and villains and, wishing to know more about human nature and conflict, transported them to an alternate world he created known as Battle World, made out of a mishmash of parts of Earth and other planets in the galaxy. The Beyonder brought together Marvel superheroes and villains onto this world, such as the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and Spider-Man, including antagonists Dr. Octopus, Kang the Conqueror, and most importantly, Molecule Man and Dr. Doom. The threat of multiversal incursions that played a large part in the 2015 Secret Wars has already been established in 2022's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and we can strongly suspect Dr. Doom will be introduced very soon. After Thanos, the MCU needs a main villain with another more original motive. The Beyonder's desire to understand human nature allows for interesting narrative possibilities and philosophical discussions. Why conflict is inevitable, why people always want to achieve something more, and why imperfection makes life worth living are some of the themes is the culmination of the MCU's Phase 5 could tackle. Not to mention, Beyonder is leagues and bounds beyond the power of Thanos.
Number 10, X-Man. It's not a deadly superhero list without at least one Gray or Summers offspring making the cut, and X-Man is both, genetically speaking at least. X-Man is Nate Gray, who hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality of Earth 295. He is known as X-Man, and is also sometimes referred to as Mutant Jesus. So I think you can imagine what we're working with here. Nate Gray was created by the Mr. Sinister of his reality using the genes of both Jean Grey and Scott Summers. He represents the greatest potential in terms of power for their offspring. But despite being created by Sinister using Grey and Summer genes, he was actually raised by AOA's Forge. Nate Gray is a reality warper, and a mighty one at that. Reality warpers, especially stable ones like Nate, would be extremely dangerous to have in the MCU because they would be limitless in terms of what they could do. Especially Nate Gray, he is very much limitless. Number 9, Amass. Amass is one of my favorite new mutants that I've met in the last little while. They appear in the current Marauders run that started this year in 2022 and is written by Steve Orlando. Amass was created by Orlando and Eleonora Carlini. This mutant is wild. We don't know that much about them yet, but what we do know is that they can basically combine mutant powers and mutants together. Hence their name of Amass, because they amass things. They hail from a hidden ancient civilization of mutants known as the Threshold that existed eons ago, and which we are only now learning about in the comics, and this was actually said to be like the first ever mutants to have existed. As of Marauders issue number 9, we do not know this mutant's limitations yet when it comes to their powers, and so I could definitely see them being a character who could easily break the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If they are as powerful as I suspect they are, and I suspect they're probably pretty powerful.
At number 8 is the destruction of Xandar in Infinity War. Now, I love Infinity War, but one of my main criticisms of the movie has always been that it's too hard to track how Thanos gets all the Infinity Stones. In the comics, this is obviously explored across multiple issues, and for good reason. It is essential to the payoff of Thanos carrying out his final plan. But in the movie, this process isn't quite given the respect it needs, and especially not in regards to the Power Stone. The way that the stone is acquired by Thanos is when he steals it from the planet Xandar, which he of course destroys in the process. But not only do we not get to see any of this happen, it's just told to us in passing by Thor. And on top of that, the Guardians of the Galaxy don't even really react, or at least not how they should have, considering they'd just gotten done protecting the now non-existent planet. I understand that the movie needed to be kept short, but all of the other stones get their own full scenes, exploring how they were acquired by Thanos. And the Power Stone, which probably has the most canonical significance by this point in the MCU, save maybe the Space Stone, just gets a passing remark. All I can say to that is, well, rest in peace to the Xandarians.
Number 7, Hulk fighting Iron Man. The question of which heroes the Incredible Hulk can defeat is always an incredibly fun topic. It usually plants incredible scenarios with some of the strongest beings in comicdom, but one person who is often overlooked is Iron Man. Now granted, in the comic universe there is almost no chance that Iron Man will come out on top in a fight against the Hulk. It may be a long fight depending on the Stark tech being used, but I digress. The MCU gave us a good look at why Iron Man is no pushover when it pitted a raged off the hinges Hulk against the newly unveiled Hulkbuster armor created by Tony Stark. This fight is awesome. First off, the high octane speed of it keeps it engaging literally the whole time. Secondly, it perfectly shows how much of a threat the Hulk can actually pose and how absolutely terrifying he actually is. And thirdly, bouncing off of that, Robert Downey Jr. shows us both how utterly terrifying it would be to fight a monster like the Hulk in a suit of armor, while still remaining incredibly hilarious and delivering every line with a perfect mix of fear, humor, and high stress that the 4-minute and 20-second scene deserves. And bonus points for the end of the scene when the Hulk/Bruce Banner finally sees the amount of destruction and pain he has caused, lets us into his mind just enough to feel bad until Iron Man knocks him out cold.
At number 6 is the origin of Nick Fury's missing eye in Captain Marvel. As much as I love the relatively newer Waititian approach to the MCU where everything is laden with quips and goofs, this is an example of when the jokes can just go a bit too far. The first time I saw this was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Drax's overused literalness, and well, I think it's fair to say that Love and Thunder just wasn't serious enough. But one moment in particular that demonstrates how jokes can sometimes ruin things in the MCU is when we see that Nick Fury loses his eye to a CGI cat
named Goose, who simply just scratches it. This is seen as a throwaway insert that didn't really need to be there and honestly isn't even played off that well in Jackson's acting. Now I realize this is obviously meant to poke fun at the question of where his eye patch is in these earlier days, but personally, I feel like there was room to actually explore a cooler, more epic backstory as to how Fury gets his eye patch. But instead it was thrown away with the bathwater entirely in my opinion, in a manner that I felt was unneeded and a little too silly.
Number 5. The airport fight. Look, I know the MCU's Civil War was not on the same scale as it was in the comics. Not by a long shot. And yeah, 12 superheroes running at each other at an abandoned airport may seem silly to some, but for those of us who are fans, this battle was amazing. Seeing the heroes who we have seen battle other huge threats together battle each other, with some huge new players joining the wider world of the MCU, with Winter Soldier and Scott Lang finally being in an ensemble, and with Black Panther and Spider-Man getting their MCU debuts, every hero got moments to shine and have some fun. The little scuffle between Spider-Man and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and even when he fought Cap, was such a great display of why Tom Holland's Spider-Man is fantastic. Ant-Man had awesome moments taking on Black Widow, entering Tony's armor, and going giant-sized. It was weirdly fun and yet intense, and ended on a note that reminded everyone that this is all more serious than they've been taking it, leading to the much more emotionally weighted and awesome fight between Iron Man, Cap, and Bucky.
At number 4, we have a more recent blunder from Thor: Love and Thunder, and that is the awful floating head CGI of Axel, son of Heimdall. This is one of those moments that is slowly but surely becoming a meme online, and for good reason. The movie had a budget of $250 million, and to see something this low effort tells us that either A, the VFX teams were being heavily overworked, B, this scene was thrown in at the last minute and the CGI was rushed, or C, the filmmakers genuinely thought this was passable. Now, I do a bit of basic animation here and there, and what I find to be the worst part of the execution on this one is that the boy's face isn't even tracked along with the mask that was created to cut out his head. Meaning, when they grab the footage of the actor talking and cut his face out to place it in Thor's scene, you can tell Axel is swaying slightly. And instead of the artist accounting for the sway, part of his face gets cut off by the edge of the cutout, making it look like his head is getting skinnier and then wider back and forth. It's really a strange sight to see in such a massively funded project, and although I don't like to hate on the VFX teams too much because they're basically magicians who we often take for granted, this is not their proudest moment.
Number 3. Open your eye. In the first Doctor Strange movie, Stephen Strange is an arrogant and cocky world-class surgeon who gets seriously humbled when he crashes his sports car while distractedly driving, ruining his hands. It causes the former surgeon to go off in search of any possible way of fixing his hands and returning to his life work. His search takes him as far as Nepal and Kathmandu, where he finds the Kamar Taj, seeking a mystical form of healing which Strange passes off as hokey pseudoscience and a waste of his time. Well, time to be humbled again, Doctor. As the Ancient One, played wonderfully by the ever-amazing Tilda Swinton, opens his eyes to the spectrum of the infinite universes, we get to witness possibly the wildest display of visual effects in a Marvel film ever. With Steven zipping across dimensions in his astral form, the entire sequence is a treat to the eyes and the mind, with visuals that aren't easy to comprehend on first viewing. Even 6 years after the film's release, this scene still holds up against other VFX heavy moments in films that came after it. And I think another Doctor Strange special effects moment of greatness that deserves at least a mention is that awesome Doctor Strange vs. Thanos fight in Infinity War. So awesome.
At number 2 though is the time that I'm sure we're all familiar with, which is when Quill loses his cool and screws everything up during the final battle with Thanos in Infinity War. This is one of the most infuriating moments, not just in the MCU, but in any movie I've ever seen. I get the argument that this is just part of Quill's character, that he's liable to act on emotion, but I still don't think this writing is justified. Because for Quill to hit Thanos like that and blow the operation on a whim isn't just emotional, it's stupid. So stupid that it's not even believable that any character other than maybe Hulk would do something like this ever. Now hear me out, I'm not saying that Quill shouldn't have screwed up the plan at that moment. I get that he's a big player in this climax after what happens to Gamora, but what I think they should have done was have Quill find out about Gamora before the battle, and then in a fit of anger, secretly prepare what he thinks to be a foolproof plan to kill Thanos himself. And when this moment comes, he would foolishly enact that plan, which of course would fail, and then the movie would continue. I mean, I'm not saying I'm smarter than the writers or anything, but I just think this moment was made to be too frustrating. I'd at least like to see Quill face some kind of scrutiny for this mistake in upcoming MCU stories. I mean, come on.
And in at number 1 is Avengers Assemble. Not to sound too much like a nerd or anything, but I went to see Endgame by myself at a viewing early in the day because I figured the theater would be less packed. This was the week the movie released, so I was dumb to think that. The theater was full, but it didn't stop me enjoying the movie, and it definitely didn't stop the involuntary wave of feeling like both crying and laughing when in the climax of the movie, when the odds just stacked themselves up against the remaining Avengers, when the alternate timeline Thanos attacked after they had assembled the Infinity Stones. We see Steve standing alone against Thanos' forces, only for a radio static to come in on his earpiece as Sam Wilson tunes in on your left, and a sorcerer's portal slowly opens up, revealing T'Challa, Shuri, and Okoye waltzing on in. That small glimmer of hope is enough to bring a tear to your eye, but then the small glimmer becomes an outstanding wave of relief, happiness, and spectacle as a whole damn army of every single hero plus the combined forces of sorcerers, Asgardians, Wakandans, and Ravagers, and more all come pouring through multiple various portals in a huge sweeping sequence culminating in Steve calling Mjolnir to him as he yells, "Avengers!" And as the scene goes quiet, he utters the last 3 syllables that fans have been waiting for ever since the first Avengers movie hit screens in 2012. Assemble. Sparking one of the most awesome battles in MCU history. I literally had goosebumps just typing this.
Let's get right into the swing of things with number 10, Black Cat. Fans have been waiting for this anti-hero to appear at odds with Spider-Man on the big screen for decades. I personally have been waiting my entire life, but it seems like Marvel has just been sleeping on Black Cat. Well, Marvel, it's time to wake up because Felicia Hardy goes hard. Not to mention the next entry in the MCU Spidey series would be the perfect time to introduce Black Cat as Pete's contentious love interest. Now, I know we all ship Tom and Zendaya, no questions asked, but as for the characters they play, Pete is going to be starting out with a clean slate as everyone's forgotten who he was. So of course now would be the perfect opportunity to introduce a new Heartbreaker. Not to mention Black Cat's ambiguous nature falls right in line with what Marvel's been doing recently with their moral twists on characters, as we saw Loki star as a hero in his own show while Scarlet Witch's character arc went in the total opposite direction. Not only would Felicia add to the roster of morally questionable characters, but she would also make all of us nerds super happy. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to the channel, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Magneto. After Disney's acquisition of Fox and the film rights for X-Men, it's evident that the mutant heroes will eventually make their debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, bringing along their greatest and most complex villain, Magneto. Magneto serves as the philosophical counterpoint to X-Men leaders Charles Xavier. While Xavier views humanity as allies and equals, Magneto perceives them as a threat to genetic evolution. These fundamental differences have fueled a long-lasting war between the two leaders and their factions, adding layers of depth and conflict to the narrative. But what sets Magneto apart is his compelling backstory, which shaped his deep-rooted hatred for humanity. His history, combined with his epic rivalry with Xavier, presents the MCU with a wealth of material to explore regarding this powerful and multifaceted villain. Given Magneto's significance with the X-Men lore, he has the potential to become a recurring antagonist, or looming threat throughout multiple films in the MCU. With the introduction of the multiverse and subtle hints suggesting the arrival of mutants, it's only a matter of time before Magneto assumes the role as a major villain in the expansive MCU.
Number 8, Zom. We have seen the character of Dormammu in the MCU. He was an insanely powerful mystical entity who Doctor Strange had to basically lose to 1,000,000 times and trick to defeat. Well, it took all of comic book Dormammu's power plus the help of the cosmic being Eternity just to restrain the extra-dimensional monster known as Zom, with the magical links of living bondage and the crown of blindness. And with these tools, these massively powerful beings only managed to trap Zom in an amphora, in a world beyond all worlds, in a time beyond all time. Well, when Umar, the sister of Dormammu, invaded Earth and Doctor Strange could not defeat her, he needed some way to put her down. The Ancient One told Doctor Strange about Zom, and Doctor Strange decided that he was going to unleash the monster to easily defeat Umar. Now I don't know why the Ancient One thought this would be a good idea, because now, being free and not wanting to go back, Zom turned on Doctor Strange. Zom is so powerful that there was absolutely nothing that Doctor Strange could even do. Even if all the reality warping heroes and all the Avengers combined forces, they would not be able to defeat Zom. It took the power of the living tribunal, the representative of the One Above All and the judge of the multiverse, who had not even been seen in Marvel Comics before this point, to just whisk him away. The tribunal then scolded Doctor Strange for summoning a being who could literally wipe out the multiverse. Zom has no other goal than to completely annihilate and destroy everything. Ever. Now Strange has since channeled Zom in extremely dire situations, and that's the only time I could really imagine the MCU even mentioning his name. Number 7. The Void. Bob Reynolds was granted the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns after consuming the Golden Century Serum, which was a much more potent offshoot of the original Super Soldier Serum. He has photokinetic based powers fueled by the sun itself that include molecular manipulation, immortality, insane super strength, speed, invulnerability, stamina, agility, reflexes, and senses, flight, teleportation, energy absorption and blasts, psionic abilities, and even reality warping abilities within a small area. He used his powers for the greater good of all, and he was the example of what a hero should be. He had connections to Iron Man, was active during the years just prior to the Fantastic Four's emergence. He became a role model for Spider-Man as well as an ally to the X-Men, and equal to Reed Richards and a friend to the Hulk. The thing about the Sentry is that he's accompanied by a dark persona called the Void. The Void has all the same abilities plus seemingly even more. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1,000,000 people and almost destroyed Manhattan. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it wasn't even permanent. Now later on in the Siege event, Norman Osborn used the Sentry to attack Asgard, but this accidentally unleashed the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. Now this did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off to destroy the universe. The Sentry is basically a god, and the Void is this god's devil. They may be adding the Sentry to the MCU soon, but I seriously doubt they will make this character or his opposite as powerful as they are in the comics. Number 6. Null. Null is the literal eldritch god of all symbiotes. He's their creator. Null existed before the current version of the universe ever even came to be, in the black void of nothingness. One of his very first acts after he was awoken by the light created by the foundation of the universe was creating the all-black Necrosword. This was the very first symbiote, and it was immensely powerful. Using it, Null was able to slice the head clean off of a Celestial. For this insane feat of power, he was banished to a void where he worked more and more on the sword, and eventually he broke free and went out into the universe with the intent of wiping out various gods until he was defeated and he lost the sword to Gore the God Butcher. And if we want to talk about villains who should have been more powerful in the MCU, he is top of the list. Null then goes on to make more and more symbiotes who all share a hive mind under the control of Null. They eventually rebel and imprison Null inside the symbiote homeworld Clintar, but he is one of the strongest villains Marvel Comics has ever shown us. He faced off against all the Earth's heroes and nearly won. He has awoken, enslaved, and controlled Celestials, and even defeated the Sentry, ripping him in half and absorbing the Void. The only thing that defeated him was Eddie Brock's Venom wielding the Unit Power, aka Captain Universe, the protector of the universe, and the opposite to everything that Null represents. Number 5. Molecule Man. While attempting to fix an atomic-powered device, a 1,000,000,000,000 accident occurred, bombarding Owen Reese with radiation and transforming his body. Now, this man, Owen Reese, was the most powerful being in the entire multiverse. The accident also caused a minuscule hole between Earth's dimension and another, allowing the being who would eventually become known as the Beyonder to become aware of a universe teeming with life, which would lead to the events of the first and eventually second Secret Wars. Now, Uatu the Watcher, who used to never become involved in the events of Earth, sensed the Molecule Man and the danger that he posed. He contacted the Fantastic Four, warned them of the threat, transported them to face him, and the Fantastic Four couldn't do a damn thing to the Molecule Man, until Mr. Fantastic was able to deduce that the Molecule Man could not alter the molecules of living things. But that wasn't even a real limitation of the Molecule Man. That was just a subconscious limitation that the Molecule Man put on himself. The kicker is that, in reality, Reese's accident was caused by the Beyonders themselves. They created the Molecule Man as a singularity in every reality to basically use the villain as a device that would destroy its universe. The purpose of their experiment was to eventually destroy all the Molecule Men at the same time just to see what would happen, which was a key part of the latest Secret Wars event. But Molecule Man, being used by Dr. Doom and eventually Reed Richards, was able to rebirth the entire cosmos. Could it work in the MCU? Sure, it could, but the character would just be a plot device. I doubt they would actually use him as an actual villain. Number 4, Abraxas. Abraxas is the polar opposite of the cosmic entity, Eternity. This means his whole reason for existing is to destroy all of the multiverse, which, I'll be honest, there are a few different characters in Marvel Comics who exist for that reason, and funnily enough, a bunch of them are on this list. But Abraxas is also tied to the incredibly unstoppable cosmic entity, Galactus. Whenever Galactus would consume a planet, it would keep Abraxas in check, so when Galactus was destroyed in a story called Galactus the Devourer, Abraxas was released and begins his path of ultimate destruction. As a cosmic entity, Abraxas' powers are essentially limitless, and his whole existence is kind of important to the universe, which means he can't really be taken out like a normal villain can. So the question of how he was defeated is kind of important. In Fantastic Four number 48 to number 50, we learned of an incredibly powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier. It was used back then to threaten Galactus and stop him from destroying the Earth. Reed Richards ended up using the Ultimate Nullifier to essentially rewrite reality, remaking it so that Abraxas just never existed. Abraxas is so unstoppable that we essentially needed a Deus Ex Machina just to defeat him. I think that if he was in the MCU, that's probably the only way they could make the story work, but I think it would basically break the whole MCU for them to do it. Number 3, Mad Jim Jaspers. When Captain Britain is sent to Earth 238 in Marvel Superheroes UK number 377 in August of 1981, we are introduced to a guy named Mad Jim Jaspers, who is the Prime Minister of England in this reality. Jim has created a cyborg called the Fury that can adapt to anything like a Sentinel can to destroy all the superpowered beings on this Earth. But that's not Jim's power. We are being delivered this information from the inside of a teapot helicopter that is immensely bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside, with the room growing and characters appearing that are already passed away or that resemble Alice in the Wonderland characters. That's because Mad Jim Jaspers is a mutant with an insane level of reality warping powers. The thing is, this character is not fully in control of his abilities. Now eventually we are introduced to an Earth 616 reality Mad Jim Jaspers who is way more powerful than his 238 counterpart. When Captain Britain pays him a visit, Jim uses his powers to make Captain Britain believe that he was dreaming and that he has woken up out of a coma. He then gets frustrated and wipes this entire reality clean to start everything fresh. Now I don't know what the likelihood of getting Captain Britain into the MCU is, with the multiverse becoming more prominent, it's more likely, but this insanely powerful reality warper is not someone who I expect will ever make an appearance anytime soon. Number 2, the Chaos King. Amatsu Mikubashi first appeared in Thor Blood Oath number 6 in 2006, and he is the Japanese god of chaos, evil, and an aspect of the cosmic being Oblivion. Mikubashi ruled and thrived over the Earth when it was nothing more than a formless void of primordial darkness, and as such, his goal now is to bring about a new age of chaos and void and darkness. He is a primordial being who was imprisoned in Yomi, the Shinto underworld, where he remained for centuries accruing an army of Oni, Shinma demons, and other monsters. Now during the events of Ares God of War, Chaos King attacks Olympus after he had defeated and controlled the Japanese pantheon, meaning he had already done that and then he goes on to attack Olympus. And that was all after the fall of Asgard during Ragnarok. This is what kickstarts his mission in Chaos War, where he slays the Egyptian gods, the Celtic gods, Shi'ar gods, and the gods of Zen law. He takes out Nightmare in the Dream Dimension, destroys Mephisto, and and casts Mistress Death out of hell, making her literally run away, and releases the souls of the damned. He has the power to defeat Eternity and is practically unfazed by attacks from the likes of Zeus. God Hercules, Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Thor together could not defeat Chaos King. To win, this insanely powerful god of gods Hercules had to punch the Chaos King into a portal to an endless void of nothingness, and this was after he had already destroyed 98.76% of the universe. They wouldn't let Gore the God Butcher be as big of a threat to the gods in the MCU as he is in the comics. The Chaos King wipes out 90% of the universe. I just don't see it happening in the MCU at this time. It's just not gonna happen. And finally, in at number 1, the one below all. In Marvel Comics, there is a character called the One Above All, who hasn't really been seen all too often, but is essentially the equivalent to God, or the creator. Now we have gods like Odin and Zeus and Thor in Marvel Comics and the MCU, but this is kinda different. The One Above All is like the god of everything, the supreme ruler of creation and compassion. It's even been represented as the writers of Marvel Comics at one point, just to give you an idea. So the one below all, as you can imagine, is the antithesis to this, the personification of destruction and hate. Another way of looking at it is that the one below all is the one above all's Hulk form, although that kind of makes things a little bit more complex. The one below all is trapped in the below place and manifests in realities through gamma and gamma mutates. Basically, this means that the Hulk and other gamma mutated beings have fractions of the one below all's power and can be taken over by the one below all for him to try and escape and destroy everything. In an alternate future, it actually does this, taking over Bruce Banner's body and using his power to devour the cosmic entity Eternity and eradicate all life in not only this version of the cosmos, but even going into the next iteration of the universe, ensuring that nothing in that universe will continue to be. Luckily, this is prevented in the Immortal Hulk story, but I'm telling you, go read that story. The one above all and the one below all seem like beings that are just too conceptual that I don't know if they'd be making it into Marvel's cinematic universe. But the other part of this is that the Immortal Hulk storyline that features the one below all is way too graphic for it to be adapted to the MCU and Disney's brand.
At number 10, we have the moment from Age of Ultron when Bruce Banner falls on Black Widow's chest. During the epic introduction to Ultron, what was going to be an epic high-stakes battle becomes a little less cool when they throw some cheap slapstick into the mix. As Bruce and Natasha narrowly miss a laser blast and go flying over the bar, Bruce's face goes right into her chest. And although these jokes are sometimes funny here and there, the trope is tired at this point and comes off as pretty aged and corny. I get it that there's some budding sexual tension between Bruce and Natasha by this point, but I feel like they could have put it in a scene before or after this epic battle, not during the first major confrontation of the movie. And maybe a little awkward accidental hand touch, not a full face to the chest joke. I don't know, that's just me.
Number 9, I Am Iron Man. Both times. Not including Edward Norton's Incredible Hulk, Robert Downey Jr. kicked off the MCU with a bang that almost no one expected in 2008's Iron Man. He killed it as Iron Man, being the heart of the MCU for the next 11 years until the character's self-sacrifice to save the universe and defeat Thanos in 2019's Avengers Endgame. He ended that first film by embracing his new superhero persona in a very big screw it moment when he told the whole world, I am Iron Man, with the credits coming in with awesome Black Sabbath music. It was almost too perfect. To bring it all to an end though, stealing the Infinity Stones off of Grimace's big purple fist and responding to his inevitability with the simple phrase he kicked us all off with. A beautiful moment to finish off the greatest threat any of the superheroes had ever faced, and a perfect comeback to a statement that proved to be pretty inaccurate.
And it ate Blizzard. Dr. Gregor Shapanka, PhD, was an employee of Stark Industries. He was conducting private research into a means of achieving physical immortality when first introduced in Tales of Suspense number 45 in 1963. However, he attempted to rob a private vault of Anthony Stark so he could obtain microtransistor designs that Shapanka had intended to sell to further finance his research because, you know, he was trying to be immortal. And that's what everyone does when they want to be immortal. However, he was caught and unsuccessful because, you know, it was stupid. I guess he didn't have the Thieves Guild training like I do. Like, I mean, I'd show the tattoo, but I have like a full sleeve on and a suit, so I can't really, but still. Anyway, he was brought before Stark, who then fired him, understandably, because, you know, he tried to steal from him. Subsequently, Szczepanka also created a suit that could generate intense cold, which he had hoped to slow his own aging process. He then started using the suit and its abilities to commit crimes in order to, you know, get more money to fund more research, because, you know, everyone needs that villain. Doc Ock, Jack Frost. Well, I mean, the news media had called this new criminal Jack Frost, which is an insult to the man who played Jack Frost in the Santa Claus 3, who also played Mr. Honeywell on How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, he later changes his name from Jack Frost to Blizzard, and eventually the suit comes into the hands of Donnie Gill, who assumes the title in 1987 after Gregor's death in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 20 in 1986. And it's 7 Crimson Dynamo. Technically, in a sense, Crimson Dynamo was already introduced into the MCU. However, his actual name of Anton Vanko was introduced to the MCU as the father of Whiplash, which I think just proves my point alone as to why Crimson Dynamo is too powerful for the MCU. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 46 in 1963, the Crimson Dynamo's armor was equipped with an array of miniature electrical generators that allowed him to generate and manipulate electrical fields for a variety of effects, including but not limited to electrical blasts, electrical override, and a disruptor field that could be used to scramble electronic devices. Wonderful. The character was so strong that they had to make a new character named Ivan and make him Whiplash, who was introduced into the comics in Iron Man vs. Whiplash, but in the comics, he was also named Anton Vanko, with no relation to the Crimson Dynamo. It's confusing as hell. And at 6, Titanium Man. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 69, nice. From 1965, not as nice, Boris Bolsky quickly rose through Soviet government ranks and became popular in the Communist Party. He had also briefly worked with Black Widow as an intelligence agent, but due to political reasons, he was assigned to Serbia. He learned that some of the camp members were scientists that had worked with Anton Vanko, who, as I mentioned last number, was the Crimson Dynamo. So Bolsky planned to make a new armor set capable of defeating Iron Man to prove the USSR's superiority over the US, because of course that's why. A titanium alloy armor was made, however, and it was much larger and heavier than Iron Man's, due to the camp lacking sufficient resources to design micro components. Because, you know, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a pile of scraps! Bolsky was unable to defeat Iron Man on several occasions. However, I don't think this character would be introduced, because they already made reference to him in the first Iron Man movie, where Stark made his suit a gold titanium alloy, which I thought was funny, since people were calling him Iron Man, but in reality it was gold titanium alloy man. But like, you know, that line now makes more sense with this. Plus, Tony's dead, so I don't think they could want to beat Iron Man, unless they go after like Pepper Potts or something. Halfway through into number 5, Fin Fang Foom. Okay. Let's be honest, most of the supervillains that heroes fight are at least similar to them in some way. Most of Iron Man's villains have some form of robotic suits like his, but less efficient. Spider-Man's are mostly animal themed. However, when Iron Man went up against an actual fucking dragon, we all seemed a little bit confused. That's Fin Fang Foom for you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, well, he's not an actual dragon, but for a while the Mandarin, who was working with Finn, did actually believe that he was a dragon of myths and legend. The two together ended up conquering a third of China, and honestly, that's kinda nuts. However, it was revealed that Finn was actually an alien and that his fellow aliens were coming to conquer Earth, resulting in Mandarin having to team up with Iron Man and War Machine to stop it. I'm sure Mandarin regretted this decision after he found out that, you know, he's an alien. I don't think the MCU is going to introduce Finn, at least yet. But honestly, I don't know anymore with the whole multiverse, and now there's more happening, and like a dragon turns out to be an alien. It's par for the course at this point. But I think that Fin Fang Foom is a little too much for the MCU. And at 4, Ultimo. Like I said last number, most supervillains at least base part of their persona off the hero, because we all know villains just want Senpai to notice them. MatPat, I'm still waiting on you. Getting MatPat to notice me will literally be my supervillain origin story. Anyway, Ultimo is no different. However, he didn't really do this to himself. Ultimo is a giant robot created by an alien race that the Mandarin had taken control of. The cool one, not the actor. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 76 in 1966, Ultimo only died recently in 2020, Force Works number 3 in June of 2020. While Ultimo was under his control, however, Mandarin claimed that Ultimo was his own creation. The only thing though that Mandarin actually created, besides changing his programming, was an artificial blue skin for the robot. Yeah. Mandarin utilized Ultimo numerous times against Iron Man, including once in the nation's capital, Washington DC. During that battle, Iron Man trapped Ultimo beneath the Earth's crust, and as a result, the robot meandered through the planet's magma. And you know what that caused him to do? Not melt, but absorb more power. Years later, when Iron Man was in battle with like a rock creature who was called the Earth Mover for some reason in California, Ultimo re-emerged without his blue skin, significantly taller and much more powerful. He vaporized the Earth Mover in a second and destroyed a remote unit of Iron Man, and then went on just destroying everything he could. So safe to say it's probably a little too much for the MCU. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Count Nefaria. Count Lucino Nefaria was the descendant of a long line of Italian noblemen, and he inherited a vast fortune. If only. Introduced in Avengers number 13 in 1965, damn, these guys are old, Nefaria was fascinated with technological advances, and throughout his life commissioned scientists to create inventions that were far in advance of their current scientific standing. After allowing himself to be experimented on though, Nefaria was granted absurd levels of super strength, speed, and energy projection strong enough to make him a danger to any and all superhero teams. That's why Nefaria was introduced as a generic Marvel Universe villain in the Avengers instead of just an Iron Man rogue, and has had several run-ins with both the Avengers and the X-Men. And while we've had some powerful adversaries in the MCU, I think that at this point, the super strong, fast, and energy projecting Count Nefaria is going to be saved for another Avengers movie at least, or maybe even a new big bad if they get that far. But I think that it's probably going to be a little much. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Mandarin. Okay, so while the Mandarin might technically have been introduced in Iron Man 3, he was used as a MacGuffin. The Mandarin wasn't actually a villain. He was just an actor who was covering up the actions of Aldrich Killian and AIM, since Mandarin's iconic 10 rings hadn't been introduced yet, which is kind of proof enough as to how the Mandarin was too powerful. And then comes the latest MCU installment, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. You've got to be kidding me. I'm actually upset that they introduced these because it totally ruins the ability to correct the Mandarin. You can't introduce the correct Mandarin now, unless they end up using the name because they were inspired or something, but at this point it's been so long that it wouldn't really make any sense. The McLuhan power rings grant the Mandarin insane powers, like manipulation of atomic and molecular structures, beams of force, vortex generation, disintegration beams, creating areas of darkness, lighting fires from a distance, mental manipulation, electrical blasts, and intense cold and ice control. How is this not the next big MCU big bad? Because he's too powerful. They literally had to make it Kang, because they're like, oh, we're gonna introduce the 10 rings, but oh no. No. Finally, in at number 1, Temujin. Temujin is actually the son of the Mandarin, who ends up inheriting the 10 rings, which already makes him as powerful as his daddy. However, this in combination with his ability to focus chi to give him super strength makes him even more powerful than his father, even nearly killing Iron Man once and for all, which would have been absolutely insane. So it's safe to say that this guy has to be number 1, since he literally has the same powers as the real Mandarin and then some. Hopefully they don't make this guy into an actor or something ridiculous like that. That seems just...
Starting off our list at number 10 is Apocalypse. If it wasn't for his goal of mutant domination and evolution, Apocalypse would vaporize the X-Men whenever he wanted to, and even if that wasn't how he did it, he has the capacity to wipe out the X-Men in a whole handful of ways. For starters, Apocalypse is what is called an external. These are mutants who are immortal, share a psychic connection, and who can revive themselves, so he can just never be permanently taken down, and he has been around for about 5,000 years. Apocalypse's original mutant ability was to be able to control his molecular structure, but over time, with the mentality of survival of the fittest, he has enhanced his abilities and even gained new ones through the use of celestial technology, celestial armor, and at least 2 different techno-organic viruses. He can do a lot with his molecular manipulation, including heal himself and turn his limbs into simple melee weapons, but also technologically complex weapons like plasma cannons. But I think the most impressive thing he can do is consciously and subconsciously grant himself a huge amount of powers at will. That makes him too much for the MCU already, and we haven't even talked about his celestial energy manipulation, his psionic abilities, or any of his countless horsemen of the apocalypse, all of whom were given power boosts by this unstoppable mutant. Coming in at number 9 is Thanos. Now before you come for me in the comments about how Thanos is literally already in the MCU, I want to point out the little fact that the version of Thanos from the MCU is like a schoolboy compared to the comic book version of Thanos. Thanos in the comics is an absolute monster. monster. In the MCU, Thanos is fueled by an altruistic motive to help the universe. In the comics, he straight up enjoys taking people's lives. Thanos is essentially an omnicidal maniac. He's extremely prideful, violent, deceptive, malevolent, treacherous, and ruthless to the point that he doesn't care about sacrificing innumerable planets and civilizations, even his own race, in order to praise his love, Mistress Death, and gain her affection. Thanos also possesses an insatiable hunger for power, always seeking to obtain objects of incalculable might and influence, such as the cosmic cubes or the infinity gems. He does all that while speaking in a super sophisticated, calm, and collected demeanor, which they did get right in the MCU, I'll give them that. Not only that, but being a massive hulking Eternal with a deviant gene, Thanos is one of the most powerful of the Eternals of Titan, with an innate ability to synthesize cosmic energy, allowing for energy and matter manipulation. Thanos in the MCU is no pushover, sure, but comic book Thanos, he puts him to shame.
Number 8. Mar-Vell. In the comics, the original Captain Marvel was Billy Batson, but the original Captain Marvel in Marvel Comics was a Kree warrior named Mar-Vell. Mar-Vell came to Earth on a mission and took over the identity of a deceased Cape Canaveral scientist named Walter Lawson. While stationed there, he met the base's security chief, Carol Danvers, who he fell in love with. He soon became a superhero, calling himself Captain Marvel, and began protecting Earth, often accompanied by Carol, who went by Miss Marvel, among other identities. He was first introduced in 1967 and was a hero until his death from cancer in 2012. He's come back a couple times briefly, but his mantle has been passed down and Carol became the new and current Captain Marvel a few months later. For the Captain Marvel movie, the decision was made to focus on Carol and to have her be the one and only Captain Marvel in the MCU. A gender-swapped version of Mar-Vell appeared in the film played by Annette Bening, but she was killed off with only a few minutes of screen time. Now, I don't really care about the gender swap, and I've never had any interest in any Captain Marvel who doesn't have the powers of Shazam, but it's always sad when a character who operated as a hero for 45 years is turned into a throwaway character. And if there's anyone out there whose favorite superhero was Mar-Vell, I imagine it would really suck to see them be such a minor part of the movie. Number 7. Scorpion. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man number 19 all the way back in 1964, Mac Gargan was a private eye who was hired by J. Jonah Jameson to follow Peter Parker around to discover how he managed to get such impressive pictures of Spider-Man. Due to his spider sense, Peter was able to avoid Gargan pretty easily, causing Jameson's scheme to fail. Jameson then paid Mac $10,000 to undergo an experiment that would put him in a green suit with a tail that would grant him the abilities of a scorpion. Jameson hoped to make a hero he could control to take out the webbed menace. Unfortunately, the formula drove Mac insane and he began attacking people, becoming the villain known as the Scorpion. Mac Gargan first showed up in live action in the MCU film Spider-Man Homecoming in a blink and you'll miss it cameo where he was a career criminal who did absolutely nothing but get knocked out by Spider-Man. But you know, that's fine. Homecoming already had a lot of villains with the Vulture, the Tinkerer, and 2 different versions of the Shocker showing up. And plus, he showed up in the post-credits scene claiming that he was gonna go after Spider-Man next time, but Spider-Man's next movie didn't have the Scorpion, and instead focused on Mysterio. But whatever. But then the next movie obviously had a lot going on, and didn't have time to bring in the Scorpion. But it does feel like a dangling plot thread that they may or may not get to, which is a real shame, because Gargan is played by Michael Mando, who is great in Better Call Saul, and would make a fantastic villain. He ranks pretty low on this list, as there is a chance he'll show up again at some point. Number 6. The Sinister Six. Speaking of Spider-Man villains, let's briefly talk about the Sinister Six. In the comics, the Sinister Six is a team of Spider-Man villains who have come together in order to try and defeat their adversary. It's a staple of the mythos, and Sony has been trying to get the Sinister Six in a movie for years since then. They seem to be charging ahead with the idea of a Sinister Six movie over at Sony that will likely feature Venom, Morbius, Kraven, and the Vulture among others, but we came this close to getting the Sinister Six in a movie that doesn't sound like a total train wreck in the recent Spider-Man Far From Home. Far From Home, as I unfortunately learned from a random TikTok a day before the movie came out in my country, features Tom Holland's Spider-Man teaming up with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's versions of the character to battle villains from across the franchise's history. We got the return of the Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Sandman from Tobey's movies, as well as Electro and the Lizard from the Garfield movies. We had 5 villains. We missed out on a multiversal Sinister Six by 1 villain. They could have brought back James Franco or Dane DeHaan's Harry Osborn's. Tom Hardy's Venom was even in the the same universe, just hanging out on a beach at the time. Heck, I wouldn't have even minded Topher Grace's Venom coming back. Or, if you have to, bring back Vulture or Mysterio. I would even take the Rhino. Sure, the movie was already dealing with a lot, but it's not like Sandman or Lizard got a lot to do anyway. It just feels like a weird choice for us to be stuck with a Sinister 5 when it wouldn't have been that hard to add one more villain. Number 5. Nuke. In the comics, Nuke is a former Vietnam soldier named Frank Simpson, who was subjected to experiments in a rather sloppy attempt to replicate the Captain America Super Soldier program. His body was enhanced and he was given red, white, and blue pills that would regulate his adrenaline, giving him an edge in combat. He is quite insane and is used by the US government as someone they can drop into situations where they want everyone killed, as Nuke still thinks he's in the war and fighting for his country. In the Netflix Jessica Jones series, which is set in the MCU, it's in just this weird place canon-wise. Nuke is a former soldier who has become a police officer named Will Simpson. He develops a relationship with Trish Walker and is helping Jessica to hunt down Kilgrave. After almost being killed in an explosion, his former government doctor gave him similar red, white, and blue pills to help him recover. He went a bit nutty, but wasn't nearly as dangerous as Nuke in the comics, which is already a bit of a waste. What's worse is that at the end of the first season, it seems to be setting him up as a major antagonist for season 2, but when season 2 came out, he was unceremoniously killed 2 episodes into the season. With the canon of the Netflix shows being kinda iffy, and one of Nuke's major appearances, Daredevil Born Again, being adapted into a Disney Plus show, maybe Nuke will finally get his chance to shine. Number 4. The Prowler. In the comics, Aaron Davis is the uncle of the second Spider-Man, Miles Morales. He also operates as the villain, the Prowler, often coming into conflict with his nephew. His story was explored pretty much perfectly in the movie Into the Spider-Verse, but this was not his only big screen appearance. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man interrupts an arms deal between a version of Davis played by Donald Glover and ends up saving the criminal's life. Later, Spider-Man webs him to a car and gets information about the Vulture from him, but that is the last we see of Davis. He doesn't give off supervillain vibes at all, and it doesn't feel like they're setting him up as a future villain, although he does name check Miles, so that's kinda fun. This isn't just a waste of a good villain, it's a waste of Donald Glover, who would be great as so many different Marvel characters. Number 3. Flash Thompson. In the comics and in all of the movies, Flash Thompson is Peter Parker's high school bully. In most versions, he's kind of a jock who will make fun of Peter or beat him up. In the MCU, he's still a bully, but he's more a modern version who will make fun of Peter online and is kind of a loser. I actually like this change. It's how bullying actually works in this day and age. I should know, you guys bully me in the comments all the time. The only issue with this is that in the comics, Flash ends up becoming a Black Ops military officer who ends up taking on the Venom symbiote and becoming Agent Venom. As much as I like MCU Flash, I don't think it would be very believable for him to go down that path. Number 2. Gore the God Butcher. For all its faults, Thor Love and Thunder gets the broad strokes of Gore the God Butcher's character right. He hates the gods and is intent on using his Necro Sword to kill all of them. The details are a bit different between versions, but that's all present in some shape. What makes Gore a wasted character is the fact that other than his opening scene, we never get to see him do any god butchering. He gets very little to do, which is even more of a shame because they were able to get Christian Bale, one of the greatest working actors, to play him, and then barely had him in the movie. Number 1. Quicksilver. Quicksilver is one of, if not the, fastest man alive in the Marvel Comics universe. Most would say he definitely is, but I think North Star from Alpha Flight might have something to say about that. He first appeared all the way back in 1964's X-Men number 4, where he was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants along with his sister Scarlet Witch. He has been both villain and hero, being a member of the Avengers and being an important Marvel character. In the MCU, he was in one movie, before being shot by a bunch of bullets that he really should have been able to outrun. He never showed up again, until a mind-blowing scene in the WandaVision show, which seemed to imply that he had returned, being played not by Aaron Taylor Johnson, but by his multiversal counterpart, played by Evan Peters. Unfortunately, this turned out not to be the case, and Evan Peters was actually just playing a hypnotized actor named Ralph Boner.
Number 10. The Thunderbolts. There is a time in the comics where it looked like Earth had lost most of its heroes, and Baron Zemo saw this lull as the perfect time to organize a super team of his own. Although his crew, composed mostly of villains, pretended to be a force for good, they originally had evil intentions. The MCU Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl, definitely has the intelligence and financial resources to pull together a Thunderbolts crew. Daniel Bruhl's Zemo has already been portrayed in a more sympathetic light in 2021's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and the Thunderbolts movie may see him continue to seek redemption for his past by spearheading a team of would-be heroes, or anti-heroes, or even possibly villains. It's also been shown known that Julia Louise-Dreyfus Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine is a major character in the movie. We've seen Contessa appear in several Phase 4 post-credit scenes already, recruiting characters like Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova and Wyatt Russell's John Walker to her mysterious cause. Contessa may be forming the Thunderbolts in response to the dissolution of the Avengers, but given the character's often treacherous nature in the comics, it's easy to imagine Contessa doing something villainous. I'm just imagining an eventual team-on-team fight like in Civil War instead of just having another big bad. Number 9. Nightmare. Originally hailing from the dream dimension, the demon known as Nightmare can imprison a being's astral form and torment them. There have been several hints of Nightmare lurking in the background. On Loki, Mobius appears to make reference to the villain's name, and although Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. might not be canon, it definitely introduced the concept of a dream dimension. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness made a statement about how dreams were actually visions into alternate universe versions of yourself, and with dreams comes nightmares. Imagine if Nightmare had been manipulating the dreams of someone like the Scarlet Witch to make her go a little bonkers. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's oldest foes, and it makes sense that he would show up, but I'm not entirely convinced he would be an Avengers level threat.
Number 8. Ex Nihilo. If we get Ex Nihilo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it will probably mean the coming of the Builders, which would be a whole world-destroying event. Worlds-destroying, actually, since they basically obliterated multiple planets in order to reset the universe and start again because of what they had learned about the coming incursions. Ex Nihilo was known as one of the Gardeners. He was created by the Builders, as were all the Gardeners. Their goal was to perfect species on planets and create life, which sounds great until you realize the level of power needed to do such a thing. Ex Nihilo could both create matter and manipulate time, which is pretty crazy. Number 7. Ulysses. Ulysses is an inhuman superhero who created a lot of commotion as a result of his powers and, well, just existing. Ulysses was actually the central cause of Civil War II. His powers allowed him to get visions of possible futures, with it believed the more clear his visions became, the more likely these futures were to happen. As a result, the heroes became divided into two camps when it came to how to best utilize Ulysses and his immense power. One camp was headed by Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel, who hoped to utilize Ulysses' powers and visions to prevent tragic and devastating events before they happened, thereby saving countless lives, but of course at the cost of punishing people before they'd even really done anything wrong. Whereas Tony Stark's Iron Man headed the second camp of heroes, who weren't as willing to put all their faith in Ulysses' visions, especially at the cost of compromising the freedom of those who had possibly not even done anything wrong yet. If you'd like to avoid Civil War II from happening, a good way to do so would be by us never getting Ulysses in the MCU, which could create a lot of craziness. Number 6. Powerhouse. Powerhouse is the codename for Franklin Richards, the son of Susan Storm Richards aka the Invisible Woman and Reed Richards aka Mr. Fantastic, both of the superhero team the Fantastic Four. When Franklin was just an infant, he caused a whole bunch of trouble due to being so powerful. In fact, he caused so much trouble that at one point Reed had to intervene by shutting down young Franklin's mind. At this point, Franklin was so powerful and his powers so out of control that he could have easily and accidentally destroyed the Earth. And this is when Franklin was just basically a baby still. Franklin might not have his powers currently in the comics, but if we were to see Powerhouse at peak strength and power level, he would definitely be far too dangerous a character for the MCU. Number 5. Hyperion. Hyperion would be a challenging one, I think, to have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, due to his similarity to one of the distinguished competition's main heroes, Superman. Hyperion is in essence like Marvel's response to a character like Superman, and he also recently appeared in the comics and was revealed to be problematic in his approach to heroics. That is to say, through getting to know this version of him and this version of his team, the Squadron Supreme of America, that recently appeared in the comics during the recent Heroes Reborn 2021 event, we learned that these heroes were a lot more shady than our standard Earth 616 heroes that we're used to seeing on teams like the Avengers. That being said, this was an alternate version of Milton, but still I think a lot of problems would exist with trying to incorporate this character into the MCU. Number 4. One Above All. The One Above All isn't ranking lower because I consider them to be less powerful than those ranked above them on this list. I just feel like they might not be as great of a threat to the MCU if they were to appear. But still, they probably never should, because they could kill the whole art of storytelling by becoming our Deus Ex Machina plot device. One Above All is basically the god of the Marvel Universe. And while it might be cool to see them appear as an allusion to the founders of Marvel Comics who made it what it is today, they definitely could easily derail plots or be used as a plot device to save the day, but at the expense of cheapening the stakes of a story. That being said, they did appear in Immortal Hulk, and I feel like that story actually utilized this character really well. So they could appear in a way that wouldn't cause harm to the universe or plots, but it would still be a hard line to walk, I think. Number 3. Sentry. The Sentry is a hero that might not only be too dangerous for the MCU, but also might be considered a little too dark as well when it comes to his origins. His danger levels though come from the fact that the Sentry not only has the power of like a ton of suns within him, but also the fact that within the Sentry lives the Void, the hero's alter ego who we initially thought was created by a split in his personality. But we would later learn in a retcon was an idea implanted in Sentry's mind thanks to the manipulations of villain Mastermind. While Sentry might be the strongest hero this Earth has ever seen, the Void is definitely one of the most devastating villains as well, and they're usually a package deal. Not always, but usually. It's kind of what makes a Sentry interesting, so I think you gotta at least have the Void there to begin with. Number 2. Hope Summers. Hope has to be one of the most destructive superheroes that we could see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. MCU mutants are coming. Eventually. Kamala Khan is already implied to be one of them as per the origin story her creators always wanted for her in the comics, but got denied at the time of her creation due to the push of the Inhumans in comics, as you know, the rights to the X-Men and the mutants were all wonky due to Fox's involvement. But now the mutants are back with Marvel thanks to their partnership with Disney, who acquired Fox, and all is well. But not if we get mutants who then get erased from existence by House of M. Hope was originally known as the Mutant Messiah. She was the first mutant baby to have been born since House of M, and her powers put her on another level when it comes to heroics. She can take on the power of any other mutant in her vicinity, and get those powers at peak level and skill set. Add in the fact that Hope's birth also caused an all-out war between the mutants during Messiah Complex, and yeah, having Hope in the MCU would both be challenging and be probably pretty dangerous. Number 1. Squirrel Girl. Despite no longer being fully considered unbeatable thanks to a fight in the Fantastic Four where it's implied that Squirrel Girl was beaten off panel, Squirrel Girl still has beaten a lot of big names when it comes to villains in Marvel Comics, and has also helped to reform some major ones as well. In fact, this is kind of Dorian's whole secret to success when it comes to beating her foes. She usually does so by befriending them and encouraging them to do and be better, which usually, just defeats them by making them good people. She's inspirational, and hey, it's contagious. And while she has lost once, I think her track record of beating almost all villains she runs into makes her simply too dangerous for the MCU. I mean, almost no one would be able to stand against her. Doesn't matter who shows up, Thanos, Kang, she'd be like, look, why don't we just have a conversation, and then it would all be resolved. Like Black Panther in What If, when he was Star-Lord and he was like, I just had a conversation with Thanos and then we fixed it.
Number 10. Betty Ross. In the comics, Betty Ross is one of the most important people in the Hulk's life. They have been in love since before Banner's accident, and is one of the few people who can reach Bruce when he is transformed into the Incredible Hulk. Betty has made one MCU appearance in the often ignored Incredible Hulk film, where she was played by Lord of the Rings alum Liv Tyler. In her one appearance, she managed to portray the mixture of caring for Bruce combined with terror at what he can become that the character needs. But she hasn't been seen on screen since 2008. In the time since in the MCU, Banner has been paired up with Black Widow and has never even mentioned Betty in any of the appearances he has had since. As far as we know, he never reached out to her during the period between Avengers 1 and 2 where the Hulk was largely accepted, or during the years after the snap, where he was able to learn to control the Hulk side of him. The thing that was keeping them apart to begin with. Betty's father, Thunderbolt Ross, has made a few appearances in the years since, but despite this, the character has never been alluded to in any major way since. This is a shame, as in the comics, she is a great character who also becomes the gamma-powered creatures Harpy and Red She-Hulk. With more Hulk and She-Hulk on the way, her dad's inclusion in the Thunderbolts, and the recent return of the Abomination from the 2008 film, maybe we will see Miss Ross again soon. Number 9. Mr. Fantastic. In Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we got to see a few well-loved familiar faces, especially when we were introduced to the Illuminati. We got to see Captain Carter, we were reintroduced to Black Bolt after his disastrous appearance in the Inhumans show, and even Patrick Stewart as Professor X in his classic yellow chair. Most surprising was the appearance of one of the most consistent fan castings in MCU history, with John Krasinski appearing as Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. Obviously the Illuminati were pretty short-lived before they were all brutally killed by Wanda, but the briefness of Mr. Fantastic's appearance was especially disappointed, with him doing little to no stretching, telegraphing his team's plan to the Scarlet Witch, and being turned into spaghetti almost immediately. This isn't too bad, as it is meant to be a cameo appearance, and we are getting a Fantastic Four focused film quite soon, but Kevin Feige has heavily implied that Krasinski playing Reed was a one-time thing, and that the main Fantastic Four will have a different Mr. Fantastic. If that is the case and he doesn't at least show up on the Council of Reeds, then I'd rather they had not used him at all. But while we're on the subject, my choice for Reed is Glenn Howerton from Always Sunny, with Miles Teller as the Maker.
At number 8 is Galactus. Galactus, the colossal villain who came from the universe that preceded our own, is undoubtedly well overdue for an appearance in the MCU. As a sentient being of immeasurable scale and power, Galactus possesses abilities that surpasses those of numerous Marvel villains encountered by the Avengers. His insatiable hunger drives him to consume entire planets, drawing upon their energy to sustain his own existence. The sheer magnitude of Galactus elevates him to a status akin to that of a deity within the comic book realm, and it's often required monumental alliances and extraordinary efforts to thwart him. Introducing Galactus into the MCU would definitely be an epic undertaking, as the Avengers and the other Marvel heroes would face an unparalleled challenge, testing the limits of their powers, ingenuity, and unity. The sheer scope of Galactus' presence, his limitless power, and the grandeur of the battles fought against him in the comics make him an ideal candidate for a cinematic villain of monumental proportions. A confrontation with Galactus would not only push the boundaries of the MCU, but also provide an opportunity to showcase the full extent of his hero's abilities while captivating audiences with an awe-inspiring spectacle on an intergalactic scale. And as an added bonus, getting Galactus would almost definitely mean we get Silver Surfer, as the two come as a package. And while I'd really like to see them both back on the big screen again, all I can hope is that Galactus keeps his towering physique, as opposed to turning him into a cosmic dust cloud like they did for that Fantastic Four movie. At number 7 is Mephisto. Mephisto, the notorious Marvel villain, is long overdue for an appearance in the MCU. With a rich history in the comics, Mephisto has showcased his malevolence by acting as an antagonist to both heroes and villains alike. This unpredictability makes him the perfect wild card for MCU, as his agenda and allegiances remain elusive. Countless YouTube theories have attempted to unravel the mystery of Mephisto's eventual arrival in the MCU, speculating on various possibilities. While many anticipated his debut in the WandaVision series, even associating him with Agatha Harkness' peculiar pet rabbit, Mr. Scratchy, the devilish character has yet to materialize. However, as Marvel ventures further into the realm of horror, the stage is set for Mephisto to finally make his long-awaited appearance. At number 6 is Mr. Sinister. While the enigmatic geneticist has been teased in the X-Men films, it's inevitable that he takes a center stage here. Sinister's immorality and need for manipulating lives make him a formidable foe. He's played a pivotal role in the existence of the Summers family, and his sinister experiments unleashed demons in the catastrophic Inferno event. Sinister's most notorious creation, the Legacy Virus, was a mutant-killing disease that wreaked havoc on the mutant community. Not stopping there, he also decimated the Morlocks, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. But what truly sets Sinister apart is his chilling worldview, devoid of empathy, pity, or any discernible emotion. His relentless pursuit of knowledge and scientific investigation comes at the expense of countless lives. He is driven by an insatiable desire to understand, leaving ruin and despair in his wake. In a world where villains often possess some redeeming qualities or trace of humanity, Sinister stands out as the embodiment of pure malevolence. At number 5 is Apocalypse. Apocalypse, the most godlike adversary within the X-Men universe, is a villain eagerly anticipated for the MCU. Revered as a deity since the days of the Egyptian pharaohs, Apocalypse possesses immeasurable power, establishing himself as one of the few Marvel villains with indeterminate limits to his abilities, thus making him a formidable global threat. As the oldest mutant on Earth, Apocalypse has repeatedly triumphed over the X-Men and their allies in the comic books. His inexorable quest for planetary domination is fueled by centuries of knowledge and experience, enabling him to stay one step ahead of the X-Men at all times. Witnessing the MCU heroes scramble to keep pace with his calculated moves would be a sight to behold. At number 4 is Annihilus. Annihilus stands poised for an imminent appearance within the MCU. With a rich history woven into Marvel Comics' epoch and stories, he's emerged as both a foe and an ally to the Avengers, leaving an undeniable mark on their collective legacy. As the enigmatic ruler of the treacherous Negative Zone, Annihilus possesses an unparalleled immortality attained through extensive exposure to cosmic energies. This enduring vitality has made any interaction with him a high-stakes venture, wherein alliances are forged or broken on the brink of annihilation, pun intended. In the comics, Annihilus' status as an immortal antagonist has made him an inexorable force capable of relentless resurrections that span generations within the esteemed family lineage of Reed Richards. One of his most famous acts was the slaying of Johnny Storm, the valiant Human Torch of Fantastic Four. At number 3 are the Clintars. For all you fake Spidey fans up there, the Clintars are the original name given to the race of symbiotes like Venom and Carnage. These aliens have always been major players in the Spider-Man mythos and are beloved by fans for their unique and dangerous abilities, as well as their complex relationships with the web-slinging hero. And although Venom got his own standalone films, we've yet to see him or his alien brethren appear in the MCU, save for Eddie's brief cameo in the end credits scene of No Way Home. Not only would Venom's inclusion open the door for a second, and hopefully less emo, take on Black Spider-Man, but it will also give us an opportunity to introduce other symbiotes like the fan favorite Carnage or my personal favorite Toxin. And that's without even mentioning Null and his army of freaking symbiote dragons. You heard me right, symbiote dragons. Feige, come on, please make this happen already. At number 2 is Doctor Doom. As news spreads about the upcoming Fantastic Four movie joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's clear that the arrival of the superheroes team's most iconic antagonist, Doctor Doom, is bound to make an appearance. While many of Marvel's prominent villains originate from the cosmic realms, the inclusion of Doctor Doom would introduce an earthbound adversary capable of rivaling the likes of Thanos. Renowned for his intellect, mystical abilities, and indomitable will, Doom possesses the potential to become an unparalleled force of terror within the MCU. Moreover, the character's enduring popularity among Marvel fans guarantees an enthusiastic reception on his on-screen portrayal. Well, almost guaranteed. With his complex motivation, tragic backstory, and grandiose aspirations, Doctor Doom promises to captivate audiences and serve as a long-term nemesis for the heroes of the MCU. Whether plotting world domination, engaging in political intrigue, or harnessing his formidable technological or mystical powers, the inclusion of Doctor Doom would elevate the stakes to inject a fresh dynamic into the ever-expanding MCU, ensuring his reign of dominance is enjoyed by fans for years to come. And at number 1 is Hobgoblin. Now I bet there are a good portion of you who are surprised that Hobgoblin takes the number 1 spot. Well, get this, ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the Hobgoblin has been playing a major role in the MCU Spider-Man films since Homecoming? That's right, Hobgoblin is already in the MCU, but he hasn't taken on the Goblin persona yet. And as for all of you fans who still haven't put 2 and 2 together, one of the, albeit many, alter egos of the Hobgoblin in the comic books is none other than our main man, the glorious Ned Leeds, aka the guy in the chair. This adds a whole new level of depth to that time Ned said to Parker, "I promise you, I won't turn into a supervillain and try to off you." Well, ladies and gents, if fans get our way, that quote will have been completely meaningless. In the comics, Ned was brainwashed into becoming a villain by Roderick Kingsley's Hobgoblin, but personally I wouldn't mind if we just skipped Kingsley altogether and went straight to the downfall of Ned, because I think that we could do a lot better than the brainwashing trope. We already got enough of that with Bucky.